I am typically leery by nature of extrapolating too much from Missouri elections that do not happen in August or November. The turnout is lower. You have really motivated people coming out for local elections compared to people that aren't as tuned into politics. And obviously, a lot can happen between April 2026 and November 2026. But there were two things that happened that I just can't really ignore. And I think that they're data points to what could be the most interesting political trend in Missouri politics over the next 5 to 10 years. And that is where St. Charles County goes in terms of state and federal elections. So the two elections that I'm referring to are the fact that a slate of conservative candidates lost pretty soundly in a race for the Francis House School Board, and that St. Charles County voters rejected a property tax freeze by a nearly 60-40 margin. Now, there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that could probably explain these results. I got the impression that the non-conservative slate was just a lot better funded and better organized than the conservative slate. And I think when you look at Proposition RT, there really wasn't a well-organized and well-funded pro side, but there was a really well-organized and well-funded anti-side. So I think you got to take that into consideration. But this is yet another sign, in my opinion, that St. Charles County voters are at least receptive to quote unquote Democratic candidates or Democratic ideas. The biggest example in 2024 was the fact that St. Charles County voted for Amendment 3, which repealed the state's abortion ban and placed constitutional protections for abortion in the Missouri Constitution. Now, this has not trickled down yet to candidates. There are no elected state legislative officials from St. Charles County, and there are no county officials in St. Charles County. I think there are two reasons why St. Charles County is so critical. Number one, inevitably, all of St. Charles County is going to be in one congressional district. It may not be for this cycle. It may not be for 2028. But as soon as redistricting happens again, St. Charles County is going to be in one district. And if you have a scenario where a Democratic candidate can win St. Charles County outright, and it's paired with, say, all of the city of Columbia, which is probably the most Democratic electoral jurisdiction outside of St. Louis or Kansas City, that congressional district may not be a slam dunk for Democrats, but it becomes pretty analogous to Mo2, which is where Ann Wagner is. And that is good long-term for Democrats across that area, because if you have an infrastructure that is constantly competitive, eventually that's going to trickle down to state legislative races. But I think the more important thing to keep in mind is I've said for years that Missouri Democrats are going to be a minority statewide party if they are getting blown out in rural areas and they cannot gain ground in fast-growing suburban parts of the state. And especially because it's looking like Jefferson County is just a complete lost cause for Democrats. For instance, voters there approved a property tax freeze by a pretty wide margin, and it just does not look like that area of the state is going to be moving toward the Democrats anytime soon. Building a lot of Democratic infrastructure in St. Charles County is pretty critical for building the second end of that three-legged stool. That's just sort of my stream of consciousness thoughts. What do you all think? Do you think St. Charles County is competitive potentially for Democrats, or do you think that Republicans are going to continue to dominate there? Drop a comment below, and I might use your comments for a future St. Louis Public Radio story.